Our apologies for the interruption in service. We had some technical issues. My name is Janet Kerr-Lesson. I'm your host with my co-host, Dr. Sasha Lesson. And today we have once again with us the incredible Stephen-Bassett. And on the show today we will talk about the status of the Congressional Hearing Initiative, the recent Washington Post article, and why disclosure must happen, and soon, please soon. Stephen-Bassett is the Executive Director of Paradigm Research Group, which was founded in 1996 to end the government-imposed embargo on the truth behind the so-called UFO phenomenon. Stephen has spoken to audiences around the world about the implications of formal disclosure by world governments of an extraterrestrial presence engaging the human race. He has given over 1,000 radio and television interviews, and PRG's advocacy work has been extensively covered by national and international media. In 2013, PRG produced a citizens' hearing on disclosure at the National Press Club in Washington, and recently launched an initiative seeking the first hearings on Capitol Hill since 1968 regarding the extraterrestrial presence issue. PRG is also working to see that issue included in the ongoing presidential campaign. And we're going to talk about that more. Dr. Lesson, what would you like to say before we bring on Steve?
Okay, well, Steve is a lobbyist, a disclosure lobbyist. He's been doing this for a very long time. And so part of what you're going to get is the history of this movement, of what it would mean to have disclosure, and what the big move is going to be and when that's going to be. And we're going to have a little look at the Rockefeller Initiative, and then we're going to explore the benefits that disclosure is very likely to give us.
Welcome, Steve. Welcome back to the show.
Yeah, Janet, it's great to be with you.
I saw you at the Star Wars conference in Lawton last month, and you talked about the presidential campaign and the Rockefeller Initiative. And we definitely want to get to that because I think that's a critical point to what is coming down the line.
Yes. Essentially, we're kind of closing in on the government on this issue, finally, God knows. This rather bizarre circumstance, not quite unprecedented in history, but it's close. It's been going on now since Roswell.
Mm-hmm.
And that is that the Roswell event confirmed, as far for anyone that had any doubts, that there's an extraterrestrial presence. They got a vehicle, they got bodies, they got a live ET. There were some color brother crashes as well at that time. And so the issue now is fully out there. And the U.S. government made a decision that the American people could not handle that information. They were also concerned that it was such a jolt that, given the nuclear arms race that was underway and where that seemed to be going, that it might possibly endanger the ability to deal with that. So for national security reasons, the government decided we are going to deny this is true. We're going to undermine research. We're going to surveil researchers. We're going to intimidate witnesses. We're going to manipulate the media. Certainly we're going to demand that certain media go along with this. This is back in the late 40s, early 1950s when they had a lot more influence. And now we're in the 68th year of this policy, which I'd call an embargo, a trip to embargo. And it's getting pretty strange. In the 68 years since Roswell, hundreds of millions of people have come to realize that we're being engaged by ETs. It might even be in excess of 1 billion, easily, based upon some of the polling that's been done. So it's a situation where you have easily the most important information in history is still being denied by a government to a people that increasingly know that it's not true, that it is true. Mm-hmm. This is very, very strange. And it's created all kinds of bizarre outcomes and what have you. It's twisted up the media, and it's helped undermine trust in government, which is very, very low, and it's not helped undermine trust in media. It's kind of a sickness. It's become part of what I call institutional lying, which is what the Soviet Union was pretty much based on, and the United States is moving in that same direction.
Well, it sounds like it's positive that people are realizing that the government lies, and instead of just swallowing it, that could be a positive outcome of the mass realization that there is the ET presence and has been for quite a while.
Well, yeah, we're starting to learn more about the American government since 1991 because of the rise of the Internet. Up until then, I, like everyone else, was raised on government propaganda regarding our enemy, the Soviet Union. And one of the key points that was made in this propaganda was that the Soviet Union lied, that they lied to their people, they completely controlled the press, papers, television, radio, and that was filled with lies. And so it was a propaganda-driven, authoritative control state. And that's what we were told. And that actually was pretty much true. And then what happened was, when the Cold War was over, since then, we started to realize that the United States took on a lot of those same traits. It emulated the Soviet Union in order to defeat it. And that while the Soviet Union starts to shift away from totalitarian state into a capitalist state, a democracy of sorts, which it's still going through that process, we have continued down the road of institutional lying. It is very strange. We became our enemy, and now we can't get out from under that. So people have always known that governments lie. They're just becoming aware that the U.S. government lies, and lies in big ways, and that's kind of a tough one for them. It's very, very much of a shock. So,
but they were lying even during the Cold War, so they were actually doing the same thing at the same time as the Soviet Union.
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm saying that we are learning that the U.S. government was conducting manipulation, propaganda, and lying, very much like the Soviet Union. Not quite to that extent, but bad enough. But what's bad is we're not leaving that behind. We're getting worse. So it's like we won the battle, but we lost the war. We shall see. But anyway, so the whole thing is wrapped up in all this. It's very heavy-duty stuff. It's macroscopic. It's massive. It is extremely difficult to advocate about this and to address this issue. It is very hard. In the Soviet Union, during that entire time, from 1918 through 1991, I assure you, very, very few activists were able to do much of anything because they were either murdered or they were put in the gulag. So being an activist in the Soviet Union was pretty much a hopeless cause, almost. There were a few that made some headway, but it was not many. And overall, there's not much they can do until the Soviet Union collapsed under its own weight. The U.S. is not that bad, and so we do have the ability to engage. We have the ability to advocate. But the U.S. government has gotten extremely good at getting what it wants without having to employ the same dramatic or draconian measures the Soviet Union did. We're turning into our former enemy, and we're doing it in a way so well done that people are not quite getting that. But they're upset, they're anxious, they're worried. So in that context, all right, we have been trying to get the U.S. government to finally end this embargo on the reality of the ET presence. Interestingly enough, there was another embargo that the government began back in 1963 that should have ended 20 years ago but didn't, and that was the embargo on Cuba. And that finally is coming to an end as of this year, interestingly enough. 20 years late, but better late than never. Well, that embargo was easy in terms of addressing it, dealing with it, making a case, compared to this one. Because in this issue, trying to end this embargo, the government is denying that the focus of the embargo exists at all. It's as if you were trying to convince the U.S. government to end its embargo of the island of Cuba, and the government's official position, supported by the media, was that, what are you talking about? There is no Cuba. There is no island in the Caribbean south of Florida. It's all a hoax. Right? It's that bizarre, and that is where we are. Well, the point is that we're maneuvering the government into a position where it's kind of run out of room to maneuver. And that story is complicated. We talked about it on your show, I think, a little bit. But essentially, what has come together is we've got this bizarre election in 2016 campaign.
Yeah.
Started in early 2015, right? Mm-hmm. 2-year election, 20-some candidates to begin with, still about 15 left, I think. And one of those candidates, Secretary Hillary Clinton, making her second effort to become president, is connected to the ET issue, though she has never spoken about it, never acknowledged it. And that poses problems for her if it gets away from her. That's true of any candidate. Right? And Pattern Research Group has created a situation where she's about to be confronted with all this. And when that happens, it's going to trigger an avalanche of questions related to the ET issue that will spread from her to other people and ultimately the entire array of candidates and explode the issue into a point where disclosure will almost certainly be forced out of the White House. That's where we are. We're on the edge of that. We have been on the edge of that for months. And the reason it happens is that we had a successful mock congressional hearing, citizen hearing on disclosure in 2013. It got substantial coverage. It was very successful. It was filmed, and so we have a 30-hour video record of it. And that video record was shipped to the entire House and Senate in early November of 2014. I then followed up in late November, and PRG raised enough money to put a publicist, a local long-term publicist, into play. And we started pressing at the media to bring all this forward and get this issue into play in the political press, particularly in Washington. And we were helped along by the fact that the Clintons, aware of what's going on, and the White House, fully aware of what's going on, started to interact with this process for reasons that are fully not clear. But they were aware that this was coming as early 2014. It was supposed to be launched on March the 31st of last year, but it was delayed. But the Clintons, not realizing that we had changed the date, scheduled President Clinton on Jimmy Kimmel's show. He arranged to be asked about extraterrestrials. He responded. And then John Podesta, who was an advisor to Obama throughout 2014, put out a tweet from his official White House account on February the 13th of this year, stating that his biggest failure in 2014 was once again not securing the disclosure of the UFO files. It was a bombshell that should never have happened, but it did. We got all over that. And then I began to get calls from the various offices and began the process of meeting with members of with staffers on the Hill and both the Senate and the House side. And then President Obama turns up on the Jimmy Kimmel show on March the 13th and basically arranged to get asked exactly the same question. And he gives a response that can be viewed on the Internet quite easily. And then...
So they're both hinting. They're all hinting.
there's a game being played. There's a dialogue going on here. This is a very complicated game. I don't call it a game. Strategy being played out here. It has to be played out in this bizarre way because of the stupid truth embargo. Mm-hmm. And everybody having to deal within it and afraid of the consequences if it doesn't go well. So all through March, April, May, June, July, I'm meeting with various members of Congress, but all of this, the Kimmel appearances, the tweet from Podesta, essentially begins the media process. And so from the beginning, from late November when I arrived last year, we have been getting unprecedented political coverage of this issue, beyond anything we have ever seen.
Good.
The Washington Times, substantial article, activist demands congressional action on aliens of the extraterrestrial time, followed by another Washington Times piece, lobbyist buzzes Washington over extraterrestrials and a government truth embargo, followed by riot. Obama's top political advisor wants to tell the world about UFOs, followed by the Huffington Post. Outgoing Obama advisor John Podesta has UFO regrets, followed by Roll Call newspaper on Capitol Hill. UFO activist on Capitol Hill, beam me up, followed by New York Magazine, right? Where
can we find those links? Do you have them on your site?
If you go to paradigmresearchgroup.org, you will find at the bottom of that page a link to the Congressional Hearing Initiative.
Mm-hmm.
And that is where you can see all of what's been going on since November of last year. You can see the articles. You can see the press releases. You can see it all. This is all happening in Washington, D.C. So the New York Magazine does what will potential 2016 candidates discuss? When will presidential candidates 2016 discuss the extraterrestrials? Followed by Mother Jones Magazine with an extensive article. Followed by New Republic. Followed again by the Huffington Post. Even UFOs are following Trump.
Wonderful.
And then followed again by Roll Call. UFO activists determined to inject extraterrestrials into the 2016 race. Followed by the New York Observer, right? Meet the lobbyists proposing the U.S. government, or pressuring the U.S. government to disclose extraterrestrial activity, followed by the Washington Post this weekend. UFO truthers want to make Roswell an issue for the 2016 Meet Their Lobbyists. That article, which has been up on the net since Friday night, will hit the print publication, probably front page style section on Monday.
Wow. Excellent job. Wow.
Now, does that mean that all the talk shows are baking my door down? No, not yet. But what has happened as these articles are being written, these reporters are approaching the Clintons, trying to get them to respond. Podesta, Bill Richardson, they will not answer them. They will not answer their queries. And they're acknowledging that. Mother Jones Magazine acknowledged it. The Washington Post article acknowledges it. In other words, we're contacting them about this, and they will not respond. That is an extremely telling thing. They could simply say, there's nothing to this. Nothing happened. There was no Rockefeller initiative, etc. And the reason that they're in a position where they really have to respond but are unable to is because the Clintons, historically, it simply happened to them. I'm not picking on them because I like them or don't like them. I don't really care, frankly, about them. But they engaged the ET issue with the intent probably of maybe getting something done in 1993 under the behest of Lawrence Rockefeller, one of the Rockefellers. He paid for research. He paid for meetings. There's a lot that took place. And we know this because we have the documents. And the documents have been up on the Internet since 2002. It's about 1,000 pages, of which about 600 are directly relevant to this effort by Rockefeller to get the Clintons to do something. We've had those documents. We delivered them to the Washington Post back in 2002. We delivered them to USA Today. Absolutely nothing was done. They were put up on the net. They've been referred to in press releases. I've done hundreds of interviews. They've done nothing. They've said nothing for 22 years, trying to hope that somehow this thing will all just go away. But it didn't go away because Grant Cameron got those documents under FOIA. I have sets of them right now in my room. I have 2 of them ready to be delivered to 2 of the committees on Capitol Hill as soon as I get a meeting. And they're being referred to in these articles with links in the articles, like the Mother Jones and Roll Call magazine, Roll Call newspaper. Links in the articles to the Rockefeller Initiative documents. And yet, right, after all these months, they haven't been cornered just yet, but the reporters are calling, and they're not responding. So the whole thing is going to come to a head pretty soon.
Can you tell our listeners, and we'll come back to what you're saying, because it's a very important point, but they might not understand exactly what the Rockefeller Initiative is, and it's pretty long, but maybe just summarize what that is.
Lawrence Rockefeller, who was a philanthropist and an environmentalist and a supporter of research into this field. He had supported John Mack and a number of other researchers into the ET field. In other words, Rockefeller was aware there was an ET presence. But he was aware, like everyone else, that while the Cold War was underway, the government was not going to budge. It just wasn't going to budge. I didn't care what you did. When the Cold War ends, the door opens. Rockefeller made the move. In 1993, he made the decision he was going to approach whoever won the election in 1992. And when they took office, he was going to approach that administration to try to resolve this issue. He was going to do it through the right channels. He was going to do it appropriately. And so he approached the Clinton administration on March the 29th with a letter that was sent to John Gibbons. All of this is in the documents, which are up. If you go to ParadigmResearchGroup.org and you click on the main graphic, it takes you right through to the Rockefeller Initiative documents. The whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Right, it's been up there now for I don't know how many years, back to 2003, I think. And he basically wanted Clinton. The goal was to get Clinton to release all the UFO files, which Clinton couldn't do, because President Clinton doesn't have access to this information. He's not cleared for it. And neither was Jimmy Carter. Neither was George W. Bush. This stuff is now run independent of the White House by the military intelligence community, which is a constitutional violation. It's not acceptable, but that's the way it is. So he tried to get Clinton to do this. He wanted him to grant amnesty to witnesses and so forth. And all of this was considered, and then there were some studies done. In other words, they're trying to engage the issue, and they weren't getting anywhere. They weren't going to get anything.
Mm-hmm.
During that same period, Congressman Stephen Schiff in New Mexico tried to get the Roswell files, and they ran him around in circles and finally told him, well, they were all destroyed. In other words, Congress is out of the loop. The president's out of the loop. The whole thing has now been taken out from under the political oversight and being run as a national security project by people we don't even know who they are.
Right.
Yeah, Obama told a little girl you have to kill her if you told her about it.
Right. We have all those.
Well, that's an anecdote, but the point is that's what Rockefeller tried to do, and this effort went on for 3 years, and we have the documents to prove it. But the Clintons made the decision in '96. Well, actually, they made the decision from day one that they would not speak of it. And the Clinton team, the Clinton inner core, which includes Hillary and Bill and John Podesta, Bill Richardson, Al Gore, at least when he was president, Leon Panetta, Mac McClarty, John Gibbons, was like, we will never discuss this. It never happened. Because they all understood that Hillary Clinton was going to run for president. Bill Clinton wasn't going to go away. That there were going to still be major players in the American political scene, and Hillary was going to become president. And they felt that actually talking about that could endanger her political prospects. And so they said absolutely nothing. And the press, under the influence of the truth embargo, never asked them anything.
Wow.
So from 1993 until just 6 months ago, Not a single question was asked of any of those people, and they never said a word about it until Warren Rojas approached them, followed by A.J. Vicens, followed by Robin C. Mangle, and now Ben Terrace of the Washington Post. And so they know the jig is up, but they still think that maybe they can somehow get through this, that they'll be able to finesse it, lie their way around it, whatever, which is their modus operandi, like they've always worked. And so they're still stonewalling it. But it's just going to get worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, they're going to push
what's going on.
It sounds like they're going to push it until Hillary has the Democratic nomination and has the nationwide challenge to the Republican nominee. That would be the time to hit her with it, so she has to talk about it.
No. We're going to hit her with it right now. I have no intention in waiting for the election of 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Between now and 2016, the world could go to hell in a handbasket.
That's right.
We're up to our ears in blowback and bad consequences. So she is going to deal with it now, and it's just a matter of time. Are there more articles on the way that are coming out this month? And at some point, some of the top news shows are going to decide to step in on this. So all this is pretty much going on in Washington.
Well, let me ask.
Follow it at ParadigmResearchGroup.org.
Let me ask.
There's a lot happening. It's a complex process, but the goal is to sick the media on Hillary Clinton, force her to respond to the Rockefeller Initiative history, which is documented. I sent out a link, a private link, to every member of Congress, and I don't know how many, 300 or 400 political media, with a link to the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure, where they could go and watch online all of that 30 hours of testimony.
Mm-hmm.
That testimony includes 3 hours of testimony in the Rockefeller Initiative, as well as nuclear weapon sightings, pilot sightings, nuclear weapon events, tampering events. This stuff is just everywhere now. So it's closing in on them, which is the intention all along. And then, after the Kimmel show, then on September the 29th, after a lot of this media has come out, then John Podesta makes another tweet in which he, responding to the actress Lena Dunham, who did an interview with Hillary Clinton, sort of a millennial, get out the millennial vote kind of interview. And after the interview was over, he tweets from his personal account, "Great interview, Lena, but Lena asked her about aliens next time." This is out there. Hashtag Hillary Clinton. That went out on September the 29th, and then Bill Clinton turns up on the Colbert Show October the 6th, and once again, is asked about an alien question from Colbert. So they're dancing around this. They're trying to inoculate themselves in advance. They're trying to put some things out in the public domain, trying to protect themselves against the inevitable outcome if it comes now, so that they can't be accused of being completely silent. But they're not telling the truth. I assure you, none of them are telling the truth.
Right.
Except John Podesta, in a sense, his tweets are basically the truth. And understand that this man is the campaign chairman for Hillary Clinton. He is the one running her campaign. He's the key person who's going to get her elected.
So if someone were to ask Hillary, and if Hillary were up to or was going to respond, what does Hillary know? What do you think Hillary actually knows about the extraterrestrial presence?
She knows about the Rockefeller Initiative, and she knows she was involved in it. She has no access to anything in the government on the ET issue. She can certainly read all the books that are out there that we're aware of. She can go to the public domain evidence, that probably hasn't. But she's connected. She knows there's an ET presence. She doesn't have to be given a tour of Area 51 or any facilities and see craft or research programs or dead bodies. She knows. She's been tipped off. Right?
Right.
So the military intelligence complex runs the ET issue. The President of the United States or candidates do not have a need to know. They're not cleared to see it. They then, because they then will not tell us the truth. So we don't have access to it.
So
the whole thing.
The last president that had the real information that, which was the last president? Was it Nixon? Was it Kennedy? Was it Eisenhower?
Wait. Was it Eisenhower that did what? What are you referring to?
Which president was the last president that had access to the information?
We don't know.
We don't
for
know.
Sure. Truman, absolutely. Eisenhower, absolutely. Kennedy, it's not clear. There's evidence that he tried to get information, but whether he was actually briefed is not clear. But remember, he wasn't there very long, and a lot happened, from the Bay of Pigs right to the Cuban Missile Crisis. And so it's possible that if Kennedy had not been assassinated, he might have gotten access. So he's unclear. Johnson, no. And then after Johnson, Nixon. Nixon seems to have had access, and that we know from the infamous story, not infamous, but the famous story about him showing Jackie Gleason some evidence down in Florida. This story's been corroborated by a number of people, including Shirley MacLaine and Gleason's wife, his widow. And if Nixon was able to show Gleason anything related to ETs, then he must have had access. So we'll go with that. Nixon, he resigns and is replaced by Ford, and we're certain that I don't think Ford had any access at all, period. Ford is replaced by Carter. Carter did not have access. In fact, Carter tried to get information, and he was stonewalled. He could get nothing. And then Carter was replaced by Reagan. We think Reagan knew there was an ET presence. He alluded to it a few times, but we don't think that he used his prerogative. In other words, he knew, but his attitude was, well, that's your business. You guys run that. I'm not going to get involved there. So if he had access, he didn't utilize it. All right, but he might have been tipped off. And then after Reagan, we get Clinton. All right, George W. Bush. George H.W. Bush had access. There's no question.
Right.
Whether he used that access, whether he actually took major briefings on it, it's not clear. He probably did get some kind of a briefing on this. So that's what we think is the situation there. And then he's replaced by Clinton, who didn't have access to anything. He was completely blocked out. And, of course, that's the point that Rockefeller jumps in here. Now the history of the presidents and this issue, which is very complicated, the best narrative of that is at presidentialufo.com. And that's Grant Cameron's work. Now, he's pretty much wrapped that work up. He's not adding more to it now. He's working on other things. But the site is still there, presidentialufo.com, and that is where you can read more about the relationship between the presidents and this issue than anywhere else in the world. Grant and I were going to do a book about that, but it just didn't happen, but the website is there. So that's that's just a glimpse of the history. The actual true history is not obviously fully known because everybody's playing their cards close to the chest.
Where do they get the money for all this these secret programs?
Well, the money to deal with the ET issue comes within the defense spending, intelligence spending. There's a substantial amount of spending that's authorized above black, and then there is a huge amount of spending that is authorized below black in the black world. The amounts are not even clearly known, but they're very large. They have all the money they need to build underground research labs, underground facilities, and so forth.
I have a whistleblower that didn't come forth in his life, and he just died on the 2nd of December, and his widow's going to tell his story. He was directly reporting to Reagan. He was Reagan's advisor, and he was on the Roswell craft. Anyway, it's a long story, so I'll bring that information. Maybe you and Grant, we can talk about it with the whistleblower. But he was under a gag order and he couldn't release it. He just died. So,
yeah.
What's come forth?
We have plenty of witnesses now. There have been a number of deathbed confessions, but those, I say deathbed confessions, deathbed accountings.
Mm-hmm.
But those, they don't carry. I mean, the person says these things, and maybe someone then writes about it or mentions it, but the person's dead, they're gone, so they don't really have that much impact on this issue. And then, of course, we have witnesses coming forward that have seen things. Their numbers have grown since 1992, and that is another major problem for the truth embargo.
Mm-hmm.
They would love to outlive them all, and certainly we've lost some, but things are coming to a head too quickly. They can't outlive these witnesses, and they know that too. And so the Citizen Hearing on Disclosure was designed to showcase many of these witnesses, to show the world that here's the kind of witnesses that are there. Certainly not all of them, and also to inform the Congress of this and show the Congress what a hearing would look like. So we held a mock hearing and said this is what it would look like, and it comes out pretty good. So trying to take some of the political risk out of the decision. So again, they know there's witnesses here. They know the Rockefeller Initiative documents are increasingly in play. They know the reporters are coming at them. But meanwhile, there's a huge election going on, which is as ridiculous and childish as anything I've ever seen. The laughing stock of the world. And it's confusing. And it certainly intensifies the decision-making on this. That, the way politicians operate now is that you lie in order to win. Mm. And if your lies aren't working, you lie better. But the last thing you do is tell the truth. And if you do tell a little truth, then you're considered a sort of renegade. But what we have now is that rather than getting really what I would call real truth from some of these candidates, we're getting demagoguery. Which is worse than truth, or even worse than lies, frankly. So it's pretty awful, and the media is absorbed in all of it, just completely wrapped up in all of it. And so I'm competing with this entire election process and all the election coverage. However, we've been successfully able to demonstrate that the ET issue is absolutely appropriate to be in this campaign. Because of the Clinton connection. If it wasn't for the Clinton connection, this would be much more difficult to do. If it wasn't the fact that most of the people involved in the Rockefeller Initiative are still alive, it would not be difficult to do. But they are. There are 32 principals, government and private principals, that were directly involved, and of those 32, 25 are still alive. Mm-hmm. And the press could start asking them questions anytime. And right now, they are asking questions of the government principals. They haven't really gone or sought out the private principals yet. I think the reasoning is that until we can get these government principals on the record, getting some of these private people involved isn't going to go very far. It's not going to amount to too much, and there's some truth in that. But once they get the government principals on the record, then they can start interviewing the private citizens, and this whole thing explodes. Now, where we are right now is that, and John Podesta, the campaign chairman for Clinton, is the one orchestrating all of this. He is the key strategist at the center of all of this. His job is to get her elected. And his job is also to somehow deal with the flanking operation going on with respect to the ET issue. Somehow manage that and still get her elected. That is his job. It is a tough job.
Has anyone been able to talk to John?
He's been proposed many times. He will not respond.
Mm-hmm.
He won't respond. Now, press don't like that. The press don't like it when you call them up about a story they're doing where he's involved and they won't give you an answer. All that does is whet their appetite. But where things stand now is that they're in their options have now shrunk. So, if the first time that Hillary Clinton is asked, when she is finally asked about the Rockefeller Initiative, keeping in mind that the proof of it all is on the Internet right now and has been for years. And sets of the documents, the paper sets of the documents, are in a number of people's hands. Documents under FOIA from the Office of Science and Technology Policy during Clinton administration. She has only a couple of options. One of those options is to deny everything. Meaning, I don't know what you're talking about. It didn't happen. Don't waste my time. That would, of course, blow up in her face. Can't do that. The second option is to say, well, yes, there were some things that went on, but it's classified. You can't talk about it. Mm-hmm. That would blow up in her face. A third thing is to refuse to answer at all. That would blow up in her face. Can't do that. So that leaves only one. Well, there's two. Another one is to answer the questions and simply lie about it in every way possible in order to somehow get through it, meaning somehow deflect the questions or respond in such a way that it might somehow pass over her.
Okay, well, we'll have to pause right there. Also, what you say, we'll be right back in a minute.
Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com, and we'll be right back after this message.
Tune in Tuesdays at 12 noon Eastern on Studio A to hear Tammy Adams share her knowledge of an unknown realm on Talking with Your Angels. Join Tammy as she uncovers hidden secrets about the spiritual world of angels, ghosts, and other entities that have been with us longer than we know. Tammy is a psychic, a teacher, spiritual coach, a leader in her field, and will be sharing her information and stories with you. So join us on Tuesdays at noon on Studio A. With Tammy's guidance, you'll find out who has been watching over you from the other side, and soon you will be talking with your angels.
The opinions expressed on this radio station, its programs, and its website by the hosts, guests, and call-in listeners or chatters are solely the opinions of the original source who expressed them. They do not necessarily represent the opinions of Revolution Radio and freedomslips.com, its staff, or affiliates. You're listening to Revolution Radio, freedomslips.com, 100% listener-supported radio, and now we return you to your host.
Aloha, everyone. There we go. The drums are done. Welcome back to the Sacred Matrix on Revolution Radio at freedomslips.com with your host, Janet Lesson, and co-host Dr. Sasha Lesson. And we are interviewing Stephen-Bassett today. But before we get back to our show, I'd like to remind everybody to please go over to that donation button on freedomslips.com and make your donation. $5, $15, $20 is greatly appreciated. And we do thank you very much for your donations, because your donations allow Revolution Radio to bring shows like ours, The Sacred Matrix, and many other shows on this network to you, the listeners. Before we go back to Steve, what do you want to say, Sasha?
Well, I hope this hour we can really get into just what are the consequences of disclosure and what are the possibilities. And if we don't just have the militarization of the information, what can it do for us?
And we were talking about Hillary's decision, lie, tell the truth.
Right.
I think she's going to lie.
Well, that's one of the options, but unfortunately for her, the information is now so broadly disseminated, and we have the documents. They're easy to review. And so if she tries to lie around it, it's going to completely blow up in her face. And unfortunately for her, that approach fits right into her number one liability. the number one thing that is keeping her approval ratings lower and her disapproval ratings higher is that this long sense that the Clintons will lie about anything in order to serve their political ambitions.
Maybe if she preempts the whole thing and says, listen, I've been lying, but now I'm telling you the truth, and here's the truth. Well, that comes up the cleanest way out.
Well, that is an option, and in fact, I'm glad you brought that up. But right now we're talking about her options if she's simply confronted by a direct question by a high internalist in a situation she can't dodge it. So that leaves one option for her, and that is to tell the truth and simply speak to what happened. Now, the moment she does that, the moment that answer comes out of her mouth, she has just unleashed every reporter and editor in town, as well as every other candidate, to follow up with all manner of questions regarding this issue and the Clintons. And that will quickly metastasize into reporters heading out to the Pentagon, the CIA, the Joint Chiefs, NASA, with, again, a plethora of questions that have been bottled up and suppressed for decades. And that's it. That is the ball game. The truth embargo will end. It will end because the situation will now be so completely out of control that the White House will cut a deal with the Pentagon so that it can come forward and announce the ET presence, which you cannot do unless the Pentagon is on board. And the Pentagon right now has never cut that deal with the White House.
Right.
So that's how it'll end. Now, from the strategic point of view of John Podesta, her campaign manager, he has an extremely complex equation to solve. And there is, and one of the equations that he's looking at is, or decisions he's looking at, is go proactive or remain passive.
Yeah.
Now, here's the problem he faces, though. She can go proactive anytime she wants. I mean, she could call a press release and say there's important material I need to discuss with you today, and she could launch into the Rockefeller Initiative history, and she could talk about it. She could talk about what happened. And as it happens, she does have a very easy fallback. Not fallback. She has a very easy strategic move she can make. And this is what I think will happen, because I don't think she has many options, is she throws the Pentagon under the bus. She basically talks about it and throws the Pentagon under the bus, meaning we could not get access. The president was not cleared for this information. And while that was not constitutionally acceptable, under the circumstances at the time, we did not think that forcing that constitutional crisis out in the open would be a wise decision, that it would embroil the administration. It would have been very difficult, particularly because Bill Clinton had no friends in the military intelligence community when he got there. He had none. They hated him. So we make the decision, we're going to stand down on that, and it can be revisited at a later time. But she can do that in either a passive or a proactive or active approach. Now, so let's stipulate that whatever she does, she's going to end up throwing the Pentagon under the bus. Okay. But if she were to choose to proactively bring this issue out without being questioned, the problem that she faces, as Podesta would have calculated, is that it ascribes to it a much higher degree of gravitas, meaning that if the candidate on her own comes forward and says, I need to talk to you today about what happened during my husband's administration in the efforts of Lawrence Rockefeller to try to get the files out and get the truth to the American people. By doing that, she is saying this is a really important issue, so important that I am proactively bringing it to your attention. Now, the problem that she faces is the question that follows, and this question is a brutal question. Secretary Clinton, if this issue is so important that you have taken the risk and taken the effort to bring it to our attention without being asked. How is it that you have remained silent on this for 22 years? And that is not an easy question to answer. On the other hand, if they take the passive approach, in which the media comes to her and asks her about it, then she can measure her response in order to give the issue as much gravitas or as little gravitas as she wants. Mm-hmm. She can kind of decide how far she wants to go, which is almost impossible to do if she goes proactive. And so the ideal situation would be for her to be asked the question, which is interesting when you look at what has been going on. Clinton goes on Jimmy Kimmel, gets asked about ETs. Obama goes on Jimmy Kimmel. And Obama and the Clintons now are completely tied together on this, ask about ETs. And her campaign chairman is putting out tweets about extraterrestrials.
So
they're literally hinting.
It's a covert being active in if you make a plant.
Well, and also those two interviews are like the giggle factor. They're bordering on the giggle factor, but they're revealing things. So they're still safe because they're doing a giggle response.
They are.
Neat. They're not giving us much. Just now we have to read between the lines.
But understand that the general public that sees a Kimmel interview on this doesn't understand the back stories.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the press do, and so these are messages to the media, right? Now, understand, they knew full well when they did this, I was going to promote the hell out of it.
Mm-hmm.
They know what I'm doing. So they know when I go on Bassett is going to do everything he can to put that under the nose of every journalist in town. So they understand that by doing this, they are, in fact, without directly asking, ultimately moving things towards the press finally confronting her with that question. You see, they can't, John Podesta can't call up NBC News and say to the NBC, bureau chief or one of the top people there, would you please ask Hillary Clinton about extraterrestrials? He can't do that. There's no way. Right? That is just not going to work. So they can't directly ask.
And I
they
still
can
wonder
put out stuff that
she
prompts
does actually know if she, it seems like she might have some more concrete information than just, the superficial stuff.
I know. Again, the Rockefeller Initiative is a fairly significant event. She can speak to that. She's been connected to it. We have the documents. Beyond that, I don't know what she knows. I don't think she has any access to information. I don't think she's been briefed by anybody in the military intelligence community on this issue. But, you can go on the Internet and spend days and months studying up on this issue. There are plenty of books you can read. The evidence for the extraterrestrial presence stands on its own in the public domain. Yeah. It doesn't need the Area 51 trotting out dead bodies or crash vehicles being trotted out and filmed by USA Today. It's already been proven. But whether she has any access to government-held information, I doubt it, but she doesn't have to. She just has to speak to the Rockefeller Initiative. That's all she has to do. Throw the Pentagon under the bus, and the press will take care of everything else.
Well, I want to go a little bit, as an experiencer contactee, I want to go a little bit deeper down the rabbit hole. If you will just bear with me for a moment. You can Google images of Hillary Clinton, and you're going to encounter that she's reptilian, shape-shifting, that she's somehow one of the connected to the Illuminati, and that she is part of the bloodline in the royal family, or the family that goes back to, what's his name, not Constantine, the one 1,000 years ago. Anyway, they're all related, the whole stuff about how the presidents are related, and it's kind of like we just have our own royalty, but we have these fake elections and put them in power, et cetera, et cetera. Just entertaining that. Perhaps her information is not from some kind of, hearing that she would have with somebody in the military complex, but because she is already connected on that other level. What are your thoughts on that?
I have no knowledge of anything like that, and I have very little confidence in any of that. That is part of a huge bouillabaisse of ideas, theories, thoughts, and assertions that has brewed up since 1947, certainly since 1991. And most of it is simply not true. But I understand it. In other words, when the government made the decision to embargo the truth of this matter, they created, and this is no tiny truth here, this is a big truth, they created a truth vacuum. And when you create a vacuum, we know what happens. It sucks in anything nearby to fill it up. And so in the absence of the truth, a mega-truth, the people have filled up that vacuum with whatever they felt like tossing in there. And since the government's overall position on this issue is not to respond to anything, very rarely does the government respond to this issue because they don't want to invite questions and follow-up. These theories basically just simply stand. The fact is that most of all of the thinking, theories, conjectures, and assertions on this issue will prove to be false. But there is some core information out there that will hold up, right? And so, but this is human nature. And the government, the government, when you talk about controlling people, when you talk about propaganda, it's not simply we're going to do A, D, and C, and they're going to do D, E, and F. They know that there's a lot they can do, but there is a lot that people will do on their own. And so the way misinformation works is the government, there will be some truth, some aspect of the phenomena that is real, and it is being engaged, and they will then toss out disinformation or misinformation related to that truth, mix it all together, shove it out the door, knowing that people are going to grab onto it. They also know that people are going to hoax. They don't have to send them a check. They don't have to, hire a bunch of people and say, we want you to create ET hoaxes. They know people are going to do it on their own. It's human nature. We do. And so all of that serves the truth embargo, right? They're playing on human nature, and I get that, and that just helps it along. And the cost of sorting through all of this is well beyond any kind of funding and ability that we have. The only institution that American people have to confront what governments are capable of doing with information is the media, the press, which in our country is protected by the First Amendment. The Soviet Union didn't have a First Amendment, and so the people of the Soviet Union did not have a press that could, quote, address the abuses of the state. They were screwed completely for 73 years, 1918 to 1991. And most of them gave up and became alcoholics. The ones that were still alive when the Soviet Union crashed, some of them got out of town. Some of them tried to, create businesses and tough it out. But for most of the people during that period, they had no options, no choice, nothing they could do. We are not that. We're not there. We have a pre-press still, and we have the press still has the power to confront government propaganda. It is not doing it.
Right.
It's not doing it to the degree it needs to. And
Are
that
they
is
compromised?
What now?
They've been compromised. They're not doing
yes,
it
of course.
They've
been compromised. We're not state-run, but they have been state-manipulated with respect to certain issues. The government is wise enough to know, unlike the Soviet Union, which basically controlled every issue, from the price of potatoes to their space program. Our government knows that, given the fact that we have a constitutional protection on the press and free speech, that they can't manipulate every issue. And so they choose the ones that are, they think, most threatening to their agendas. CIA and drugs, you better believe it. The extraterrestrial issue, Absolutely. The undermining of governments by our intelligence community, yeah. There are certain things, and in those areas they get very aggressive, and they go Soviet on those, or like not medieval, but they go Soviet on those. But not everything. And so that makes it a little easier for them to at least succeed in the areas that they're doing. The ET issue is probably the one that's gotten the most propaganda manipulation of them all.
Right.
And so the result is that an activist trying to sail this sea and catch this fish called disclosure is sailing on a sea that's filled with polluted water. The government pollutes the information pool. Citizens pollute the information pool. Bogus theories are generated. And, of course, the Internet increased the pace of that, dramatically enhanced it. Now, one person's conspiracy theory or one person's theory about shape-shifting reptilians is, in some sense, no different than some religious person's view about the nature of their faith. If person A thinks that the Queen of England is a shape-shifting reptilian, to me, that's not that much different than a Catholic who believes that, they're drinking the blood of the Son of God at their Sunday communion. This is their belief structure. They built it up for a reason. It's not accidental. So I'm tolerant. I have an understanding there. But do I think they're shape-shifting reptilians? I think the chances are slim and none that they're shape-shifting reptilians. And a great deal of all these other theories, from Nibiru's and Planet X's and you name it. These are faith structures that people are building up in order to cope with the bogus realities that have been created. And that's totally understandable. The entire religious structure that exists because people need beliefs that they can count on, that they can use to cope with the difficulties of just being human, just being alive in this world, which is not easy to do, which is why I don't diss religion. It has its role. It has its place. Is it abused? Absolutely. But does it have a place? Yes, it does. Is it necessarily true? Truth is not an issue there. Religion is about belief, and so are exotic theories. What you believe. Activists do not have that luxury. We have to operate on relatively safe ground. We have to operate from the facts.
You're within a paradigm. I deal with the experiencers. What I do is look at everything like big giant storyboard on a giant wall, and if you look at the whole picture of what everybody's saying about everything, another picture emerges, and I'm not going to go into that on the show, but someday we'll have a private conversation.
Well, but I know what you're talking about. I've talked to scores of contactees.
Right.
I'm familiar with the contactee evidentiary database.
What do you think of all the contactee information? There are literally millions of contactees. There's an organization called PRE, which is now documenting it, getting, them to fill out surveys. They're correlating the information, and there's an incredible picture that's emerging. But what do you think before I, interject?
Well, I think there's probably several million contactees. How many millions? It's hard to extrapolate. We have some sense of the percentage in the United States, but we don't know if that percentage holds up in Uganda or Australia or China. We don't know that. But in the United States, we got a lot of feedback. So just in the United States alone, there may be 2 million. And most of these contactees are still unaware. They have memory block, which is now known to be instituted by the ETs themselves. They can block memories. And then of the ones that have some knowledge, right, but from whatever source, whether it's from dreams, whether it's from direct conscious remembrance, or whether it's from hypnotic retrieval of memories, most of them are in a closet. they will not go public with it because it's too risky in their view, which is one of the purposes, one of the goals of the truth embargo was to make it risky.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a certain number, and it's a very small percentage of the total that have been coming forward. Well, actually, it's not totally a small percentage. The principal way the contactees have tried to get their stories out is sending letters to researchers. In other words, they write it up, and they send it off to one of the researchers, sort of like to put it on the record.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes with their name, sometimes anonymous. These accounts, these written accounts, have been accumulating in researcher files since the late 1970s or in 1980s. It's based upon what I am aware of, the number is probably in excess of 1 million. So we have in excess of 1 million accounts. A small percentage of those have been written up in books by people that have worked with these contactees, and these stories are out there. Some of them are famous stories, some of them are not famous. But of the stories that have been presented in these written accounts, there is a body of evidence that's emerged from it. And it is a very complex matrix that no one has yet had the money to categorize. It would cost a great deal of money to do this, millions. And this field does not have that kind of funding. But no one has been able to, or an organization has been able to say, we're going to read an account, every single one of these written accounts, and we're going to then create a matrix of evidence. However, I have enough sense of it to know that there is a bell curve here, a classic bell curve, where you have X number of accounts that fit into consistent categories, and their numbers are large, and then you move away from that center core, and you have smaller and smaller numbers of accounts that get into much more exotic stuff. The center core of information, I think, is going to hold up pretty well. As you move away from the largest conglomerate of cases, you're getting into some fringe stuff, many of which may prove to be bogus, because there are hoaxes here, and there are complete misunderstandings here. But there probably are some what we'll call outliers that will be proved to be true that are pretty amazing. But the core evidence, right, is emerged. And it refers to telepathy. That it refers to the fact that there's more than one group, meaning more than one species, meaning more than one planetary civilization probably involved. Mm-hmm. So there seems to be an alliance or some sort of working relationship. And they're all telepathic. Telepathy apparently is a natural outcome of intellectual growth or growth of the sense of the mind. That too, they are taking people. They are having direct contact with people, and it is not voluntary in most cases. In some cases it may be, it's not clear. But certainly they are taking people, they're dealing with them. 3, that there's a great deal of genetic work going on, including the creation of hybrid entities. They are the master of genetics. This is emerging out of that evidence. And there is evidence that they are working with people, they're giving them information, in some cases even training them to do things. They are also, asking them to teach ETs things like that. These are the kind of things that are going on. There are a limited number of cases in which ETs and humans are being reported being together. And that's notable. And then on top of that, there is what they call the MILABS work, and that is military simulated abductions, which really clouds the picture and makes things very messy. And now you're getting into a highly sophisticated area where only the top people can probably sort it out. But the government made a decision, which is quite logical, that if we're going to find out what these ETs are up to, we've got to deal with the contactees. I mean, we can't send the ETs an email because they're not going to respond. And if we approach the contactees and say, well, hi, we're your government, we'd like to know what's going on between you and the ETs, that's not going to work, because that could blow the truth embargo sky high. And so they came up with the ingenious idea, why don't we just kidnap some of these people from time to time? We'll debrief them with very sophisticated chemicals and drugs. We'll get information from them. We'll implant memories in them so they think they've had an actual ET abduction and then take them home. Evil as hell and criminal as hell, but I get it. I mean, it's pragmatic. They need to find out, and they're particularly interested in contactees that are working in government. So if you're like working in a classified program and they get a wind that you're a contactee, they're very much more likely to want to dig into your mind and find out what's going on. This is the core information. In all of this, in the center core of information, are we getting info about shape-shifting reptilians? No, we're not. Are we getting accounts of reptilian-type beings? Yes, we are. All right? So that's where I have to stay. I have to stay.
Are we getting accounts of wonderful medical advances, I would like to know, in that center? Are there wonderful medical possibilities?
Well, this is where we can depart from the present and move a little bit into the future. And one of the reasons why we have a basis for substantial optimism, there are some notable accounts amongst contactees of healing events where the person comes down with a significant illness, they get taken, and the illness is gone. The logical implication here is that these people are part of their work, they're part of their genetic work, which is generational, that's been well established. And so they get ill, and they don't want them to get sick and die, and so they fix them. It's not like they're just cruising around in the sky and dropping down on people that have cancer and say, well, here's a present, like Santa Claus, going around on Christmas Eve and putting presents under trees. No. It's a pragmatic thing. There's a lot of sick people down here. They probably don't have enough time to heal everybody. The fact is they can do it. More importantly, it's clear that their genetic skills are extraordinary. Mm-hmm. And genetics ultimately is the key to all illness. And so it's very easy to conclude that the ETs have the technology that would allow us to deal with pretty much every malady that we are facing, that it normally would be part of our evolutionary process. In other words, humans have gotten where they are through several billion years of an evolutionary process involving life and death cycles of countless quadrillions of animals, including humans themselves, to create adaptivity, which gives them, over a very long period of time, additional abilities. That no longer applies to us anymore. There's almost nothing that's going to happen, very little is going to happen to human beings in terms of improving ourselves that's going to come from natural selection. Possibly, you might see, if you had extreme radiation events, like a massive nuclear war, it would create all kinds of mutants. It would create birth defects and so forth, but these would happen in a short amount of time, and they would not be able to work their way out over time and create, quote, a superior human being adapted to nuclear war. Not going to happen. We've left all that behind. And the reason is our technology is now so sophisticated that we're able to alter ourselves at a pace that natural selection can't even approach. Mm-hmm. And so we're no longer in the natural selection world. We're in the world, if we're going to get smarter, get healthier, it's going to be because of genetic research. They are already there. That is pretty clear. And so one of the key questions that would normally be brought up in a nice debate at Harvard University with a professor there, whether exobiology, astrobiology, whatever the hell, or just political science, But, of course, we can't have those debates because they won't let us come and have those debates there. They won't hold those debates there.
Right.
Because the college and universities have been completely bought and sold on this issue. They have completely capitulated to the truth embargo. It is the greatest intellectual failure in human history. But in any event, one of the key questions would be, if we had disclosure, if we finally made this thing completely acceptable and authorized and formal, would open contact occur in a relatively short time after that? And if open contact were to occur, would that lead to an arrangement, not necessarily a full participation in an alliance, but possibly an apprentice relationship to a political alliance out there? And there's evidence that they have an alliance. In fact, they're clearly working together, so there must be some understanding.
Mm-hmm.
And if we have an arrangement with them, will we have access to their genetic technologies? This is a very logical process, and it's not unreasonable to think that, yes, the answer would be yes, we would have access. We would get that technology transfer. We've already done this. Humans do this all the time. Humans have been doing technology transfers to less developed parts of the planet, and allowing other peoples to advance their condition based upon technologies provided to them by other societies. They've done this all the time.
Yeah.
And so the idea that they would do this is not out of the ordinary at all. So if, in fact, that occurred, and technology transfers of what we'll call extremely advanced genetic capabilities, then which is not just about hybrids. It's about being able to construct viruses or antiviruses or whatever.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Being able to do whatever is necessary to address the afflictions that face us, including aging, by the way.
Great.
That technology would be transferred. One of the reasons that it makes sense is that they're not going to give us, super bombs or technology that we could be used by our sociopathic hierarchies. They're going to give us things which, by and large, are relatively productive and not destructive. This is one way to guarantee a very favorable reception on the part of a civilization that has basically just been opened up to the galactic reality for the first time in its basically 12,000-year history.
Well, one of the things would be the more efficient use of energy in a way that would totally restructure the finances of this whole planet.
We're not about the finances, but the energy issue is critical.
Right.
One of the things that you would transfer, assuming we haven't already reverse engineered it, and I think we have, is the energy paradigm shift. Energy is the number one common thread throughout all of the human condition. There's no aspect of human life that is not directly connected to energy. And the cost of energy is a major measurement of what you can do or not do. And we have outstripped our current energy modalities through sheer breeding. In other words, one of the technologies that they would be able to provide us would be birth control.
Yeah.
What I mean by birth control, I mean top of the line, the gold standard of birth control. Easy, minimally invasive, even possibly capable of getting around certain religious objections, so that the ability to control population would be fully in our hands, and to do it in a way that wouldn't have to be coercive, because the increasingly people want to limit population. They just don't want to do it. The energy issue is critical. We have now got so many people and energy costs so much that we're in a situation where pain and suffering is virtually guaranteed. There's no way to avoid it. And an energy shift, a paradigm shift, where the cost of energy drops by 95, 98, 99%,
Wow.
opens up solutions to all of that. And if it's clean energy, if it's non-polluting, then it's even better. And I suspect that that's also there. This paradigm shift is something that we would theoretically arrive to on our own under different circumstances. And one of the things that people don't think about much but should is that this whole transition we've been underway since 45 is unique to us in a sense. Let's assume that it's happened countless times throughout the galaxy. Not every civilization that arrives at the level of technology we have now are in the same situation that we are in. It doesn't automatically follow that at some point you crack open the atom and start building tens of thousands of nuclear weapons and advance warfare to even more destructive levels. It doesn't necessarily follow at all.
Well, I think that's what we're getting from our experiencers, as they are introducing these paradigms, these we're level zero civilization, based on Michio Kaku's explanation, and they're getting these other civilizations which are, they're space-faring races, so they don't really have to have overpopulation, because if people want to have children, they go to a place where they need children, right? And they have a lot of...
Yeah, but I'm not... That's true, but I'm actually focused on something more narrow.
Okay.
In other words, we arrive at 1945 in a certain situation. It doesn't follow that other advanced species on other planets arrive at that same point.
Mm-hmm.
Meaning that it's not automatic that it doesn't follow that every civilization that goes through this transition is dealing with a nuclear arms race and mutual assured destruction. It could very well be that they have finally developed some technology. They've gotten to the point where they can get into nuclear power. It doesn't follow that their planet's going to be necessarily overpopulated.
Right.
It's so each one is different. This one poses certainly significant challenges to such a transition, and the transition that I'm referring to is at the core of all of this. It's the root of all of this. The transition from a advanced civilization of sentient beings that does not formally acknowledge that it is not alone in the universe to a civilization that formally acknowledges they're not alone in the universe. This may seem like a trivial thing. It's not, right? It is a line. It is a paradigm shift line that is as big as anything we'll probably ever see, ever. It's the coming out party. It is a huge transition, and we are in it right now. And our transition has certain characteristics. And those characteristics include nuclear Cold War, massive nuclear weapons, enormous commitment to warfare, extremely violent, and that's what the ETs are facing and dealing with in this particular instance. It doesn't mean that another planet 10,000 light years away, where they're being engaged by extraterrestrials because they've arrived at a particular point where this transition needs to take place, it would be the same. But it is what it is, and it's difficult. It's tricky. And so one of the questions I would love to ask the extraterrestrials if I ever get a chance is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how hard was this transition compared to others? We'll see.
Mm-hmm.
But so I'm just referring to that. People don't understand that this has happened before. We're not the first sentient species developed advanced technology and had to learn about the rest of the galaxy.
Right.
This has happened before. Who knows how many thousands of times?
Mm-hmm.
We're just one. It's a big deal for us. It's probably not that big a deal for the ETs. But nevertheless, it is a big deal for us, and we're going through this. Now, we can do it the easy way, or we can do it the hard way, or we can blow the whole thing sky high. If we'd had a nuclear war in 1962, I don't think the ETs would have intervened. I think they would have let the war happen, and he would have set us back a huge number of years, I don't know, hundreds and hundreds of years, maybe more. And they would have probably just left the area and come back in 1,000 years to see how we were doing and say, okay, you want to try again.
Look, the chances with the proliferation that's going on, it seems like a nuclear exchange is inevitable with the way we're heading now.
Well, I felt it was inevitable during the Cold War. I just not think we would possibly get through the Cold War without a nuclear event. We did. No, it's not a trivial factor that the ETs did influence the Cold War. The very fact that they showed up in such large numbers in 1947 influenced the Cold War.
Yeah.
The fact that the crashed vehicles were allowed to be retained, they didn't come and recover them. They let us take them.
Yeah.
That influenced the Cold War. Then they started tampering with their nuclear weapons and turning them off on repeated occasions, both here and overseas in the Soviet Union. That influenced the Cold War. And there may be other things that we don't know about.
So what do you think they're doing now to influence our reality? We have the contactees. I interviewed someone a couple weeks ago in the Super Soldier Secret Space Program. They have technologies where they can regrow arms, legs, reattach heads, and bring people back from the dead if they're not in their molecular structure, too far disintegrated. So we're getting all these stories, and there appears to be intervention, even though they might have a hands-off kind of Star Trekian, we can't interfere paradigm, but they're still interfering.
This whole idea of a prime directive and non-interference, we have no idea. They probably have some protocols. They may vary from species to species. It may not be uniform, but they probably have some protocols, fine, but we don't know exactly what they are, but we can sort of guess at some of them. And in terms of what they're capable of doing, fine, there are a huge number of stories about what they can do or not do, and I'm sure that the majority of them are false. All right? But we know enough about what they can do from the massive evidence, the large evidence, the core evidence, to know they can do a lot. And we know that they have interfered with our nuclear weapons. We know they put crop circles in our fields, certainly in the United Kingdom, and do it year after year. They do give messages from time to time to contactees. So there is an engagement going on, but to the what the limitations of that engagement are not clear. I have felt that I do not think they would block a nuclear war. There are plenty of people that absolutely believe they would. That is a bet they don't want to make. I think that they would prefer we didn't have one, and I think that ultimately where this is going is an engagement between them and us. But they're not going to engage a planet that has just made itself radioactive and destroyed much of its infrastructure. We're no longer of much of a use at that point. So the question is, that's a key question, exopolitical question. To what extent would they interfere or intervene with our bad behavior? Mm-hmm. Right? Or how flexible is their time schedule? How long will they hold off from an open engagement if we continue to try to block disclosure? We don't know. Right? So everyone has got to sort of decide, what am I going to accept? And based upon what I accept as reasonable explanations, what am I going to do? And my answer is simple. To the extent that you can support the disclosure advocacy work, do so. When disclosure, try to give as much thought to the post-disclosure world now as you can, so that it doesn't happen on Monday and then on Tuesday you're trying to figure out what the hell you're going to do next. Think about it. Already have some ideas, have some plans, so that you're ahead of the game. Get off to a nice head start.
So what would that look like if you kind of outline what you think it might look like? The post-disclosure world.
Why would you prepare, yeah.
Well, there's several options. One, A person can simply continue to lead the life that they've led and just continue on as if it never happened. And that's fine. A person can make a decision, I want to be engaged in it. I want to become involved in it. Whether that's the pre-disclosure ramp-up or whether it's the post-disclosure aftermath. Then if they decide they want to get involved, they have to decide in what way. For those, and speaking in general terms, now for those people that have been involved in this already, that have put in years of effort, that have books that are out of print, that have documentaries that are half done, whatever, I've advised everybody in that category that they need to start tidying up. If they have proprietary issues, they need to settle them. If they have books that they don't have rights to that they've written, they need to get those rights back. They need to be prepared to really get out there and be part of this. That's part of something they've already been involved, but it's a whole new ballgame post-disclosure. So that's another thing. But for people that have not been directly involved with this issue, the biggest thing that will likely allow people to jump into is what I call the age of reform. I think that post-disclosure event will, in a relatively short order, trigger what will come to be called an age of reform, a sort of global reformation. And this partially is due to the fact that this is all happening at the time the Internet is now come into its own and is expanding and is global. The Internet is a huge game changer and the absolute ideal tool for what needs to happen in the post-disclosure world. So this age of reform means that billions of people are going to be highly motivated and highly focused to support examining all of the institutions that humans have created to see whether they work or don't work and what needs to be changed, what needs to be gotten rid of, and what needs to be improved, and so forth. And this broad-spectrum institutional reform will be what creates the post-disclosure reality. And there are a lot of people that will want to be part of that. They want to be part of reshaping the new post-disclosure world. And there will be those that don't want to be part of that. They just want to live, and they're going to hope that whatever gets done will be a good thing. It'll be good for them and can be constructive. And you don't need everybody involved. You only need a reasonable percentage, a modest percentage, to drive massive reform. And that's what I'm going to be doing. I mean, I'm assuming I'm still around. I'm going to plunge into this Reformation age, where we start really fixing things finally. Because there are a lot of things that have to be fixed if we're going to be a viable member of a galactic alliance. I think the ETs will do some things, but they're not going to come down here and clean our houses for us, get our act together, straighten out our institutional problems. It's not going to do that. I mean, unless they wanted to colonize the whole place and run it like the British thought they could do in India. A joke. They have a galaxy they can explore. They're not going to throw themselves into trying to manage the mess that 7 billion people have created. But they may be somewhat helpful in helping us to clean up our own house, something like that. This age of reform will be triggered by the disclosure event. And if we're lucky and the psychopaths don't manage to ruin it all, some of them are very apocalyptic in their thinking, and launch a nuclear event of some kind or a nuclear war just to ruin the whole party for everybody. If we're lucky and we can dodge all that, we may end up with a completely transformed planet within 50 years or less. And there's going to be plenty of work for everybody, plenty of things to do. It will be the most extraordinary time in human history, even if you're just a spectator, even if you're just going to your 9-to-5 job and watching what's going on your big screen television. It's just going to be unlike anything one can imagine. It's going to be every reformation, every paradigm shift we've ever gone through since the cave dwelling days, all together, combined.
I think it'll be much like, I grew up I was born in 1954, so I grew up with the Cold War, and we have the Berlin Wall. And as a child growing up, we thought about all the people that tried to escape, and I have friends who escaped the Berlin Wall. And now people don't understand what the Berlin Wall was about, because other considerations have been formed, and they just don't get what it was like before that. So I imagine it'll be like that. In one day, the world shifted for so many, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people in one day, a whole new paradigm.
Well, yeah, it's, Richard Dolan and Bryce Abel in the book 80 After Disclosure, they posited the idea, it's not out of the question, that we will start the calendar over at disclosure. And the calendar after that will be year 1 of post-disclosure, year 2, AD after disclosure and before disclosure. May very well be. I would certainly vote for it. I think it makes some sense, particularly if it's global. In other words, if it's universal around the world. Because having a bunch of different calendars, I don't think serves anybody.
Right.
But it would be the most profound event in human history. And it will be a time when all things are possible, or seem to be possible. And that's what I'm doing this for. That's what I'm interested in. The simple act of acknowledging an extraterrestrial presence is a trivial thing. It takes 5 seconds, 10 seconds. By a president or prime minister, whatever. The rest of the countries will follow within days. That's a trivial thing. The aftermath, on the other hand, is another matter. That is not trivial. And it will be exciting. And for those that get directly involved, very rewarding, I believe. And that's what I've been shooting for. That's what interests me. And that's why I'm doing this.
Do you think the people that are in office or are soon to be elected will lose their jobs after disclosure?
No. All the rich will still be rich after disclosure. All the people in the Senate will still be in the Senate. As the post-disclosure world unfolds, as it ripples out in time, you'll see shifts. If there is a substantial Reformation age, then you're going to see some people replaced that are just no longer the right people to be doing what they're doing, and they'll be kind of pushed aside, voted out of office, or simply leave. But that's going on now anyway. There's a kind of shift. It may be slightly accelerated. A lot of people that are working in dysfunctional situations in institutions will have a change of worldview, and they will change their approach, and they will adapt to the new reality. So it's not going to be as disruptive as people, I think or worry about. It will be somewhat anticlimactic for many people. Some of the changes may spur some upheaval. There's certainly potential for that, but it won't be upheaval that's particularly greater than the kinds of upheaval that we generate on a regular basis here in our human reality. World War II is a pretty big upheaval. I don't think it'll be that bad or anything close to that bad, frankly. But it has served the government's truth embargo to put out there that it would be tremendous transition, that there would be upset religion and economics and create chaos and all this stuff. That serves the embargo to put that out there because it discourages people from addressing it, pursuing it. So that's mostly propaganda. It's not based on any realistic interpretation of what's going on. We're always constantly fighting against the propaganda, and we're always having to deal with the polluted water, the polluted information pool. That's why government shouldn't do that. One of the first orders on the agenda post-disclosure is, are we going to put up with any more of these kinds of massive propaganda, disinformation campaigns anymore? Or are we going to let this happen again? That's going to be one of the number one things on the agenda. If we're smart, the answer will be no, absolutely not. We can't do this. We can't afford this. Life's hard enough without having governments institutionally lying about major issues. And so measures will have to be taken to hopefully stop that, and 1,000 other things.
So you think we should vote for Hillary if we want disclosure?
I have no intention of waiting for Hillary Clinton to become the President of the United States to get disclosure. Disclosure needs to happen immediately. The disclosure president will be Obama, not Hillary. And the only question really is whether he'll be the first head of state to make the announcement or whether he'll be the second or third.
So you think the Russians might lead it, or the Pope lead to it, and then what will happen? Of
course. Russia or China could announce it anytime they want to. Exactly why they happen is an interesting question. I'd love to put it to Putin if I had the chance.
Medvedev already did.
No.
The disclosure is and only is when the head of state goes before their people in a formal way and states unequivocally that their nation, their government, is aware of an extraterrestrial presence engaging this planet. That is disclosure. And that has not happened by any head of state anywhere.
What if it was another form, like mass sightings everywhere in the world simultaneously? Wouldn't that be disclosure? If it comes from ETs?
No, disclosure is when the head of state announces it, but ETs could generate events so intense that it would force the head of state to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what I call force majeure disclosure. And that would be destructive. That would be very unpleasant. Obviously, the social contracts would be heavily damaged if suddenly ETs are turning up in mass quantities and the government still hasn't announced that their reality, to acknowledge their presence. And people are panicking and they're upset and the governments are being enforced to respond. This would be an extremely destructive process that would undermine social contracts, and it would be much harder to...
We're almost out of time. We have like 1 minute. I just want to let you know what we would like to conclude.
Yeah, how do people join your organization?
Well, they can't join, but they can get on the email. As you go to paradigmresearchgroup.org, and you'll find little links to sign up on the email list, or you can simply send a subscription request to prg@paradigmresearchgroup.org. And, obviously we're accepting, support, contributions anytime. We never have enough. And those PRG.
Well, thanks so much for being with us. And another great show. And we'll have you back again.
More coming.
Love and blessings. Aloha.